Get ready for some hardcore Gimli on Legolas action. That still only counts as one. A huge middle earthquake was detected in England and apparently was caused by J.R.R. Tolkien rolling in his grave. Because we gather here today, folks, to pay the last respects to one of the most beloved franchises of all time. Hit the like button and subscribe, baby, because one does not simply wokeify a masterpiece. It is doomed. You know, it's days like today that I wish Sir Christopher Lee was still alive because he could have set the record straight. There's a new Amazon TV show called Lord of the Rings, and the best way to describe it is a giant asteroid covered in horse racing towards Earth. This is Gandalf when he sees a bearded woman in a bad wig in the new Amazon Lord of the Rings show. You do not pass! And now that I think about it, I think Gollum accurately portrays the current feminist movement in every way. Here's a fun fact for ya. The woke mobs look, act, and sound a whole lot like orcs. Also, they were grown and not born. Now you know. Anyway, let's get to the bigger point here. You know, a few years ago, I was smugly saying that Tolkien's fantasy properties would never go woke. I was so sure since Tolkien himself hated Disney. Like any other decent person, he refused to give Disney the rights to make movies after the books when he was alive, and he said that even after death, Disney shouldn't get them. He said he didn't like Disney style, and I guess you could see something we couldn't even back then. Unfortunately, Amazon wasn't around at the time. Now, let me make this perfectly clear. There are a few things in this world that I consider sacred. Tolkien's work is one of them, and his original work will outlast this whole contemporary political agenda. And if it comes down to it, I'll protect it myself, and that's a promise. But we all have to stand back and thank whatever god you believe in that the Tolkien family had enough sense to not sell all the rights. And I'll say one more thing. If Tolkien or his son are not involved, then it's not canon. Period. Full stop. And if you don't remember, they fired the writing staff immediately following Christopher Tolkien's death. That alone was enough to inform everyone that quality and the direction that the show will go. When that happened, I knew that was gonna hit the fan. My god, these people should be ashamed using the name of a dead man to promote themselves. The sheer hubris and arrogance and dissonance it takes to think that they can tell somebody else's story better is just astonishing and bewildering. Also, I'd like to mention that I'm pretty sure that Tolkien stood against everything that the crazies fight for. He is one of the most prolific writers in literary history. Most of these inbred morons couldn't even read his works if they tried. Technically, as a linguist, Tolkien would have absolutely hated the woke movement and their constant restructuring of language with a cudgel. It's important to remember that Lord of the Rings came into existence because Tolkien loved language so much he created a world so he can construct multiple languages. A lot of people don't even know that, but this is Amazon after watching Disney ruin Star Wars. Meat's back on the menu, boys. Anyone who had expectations that this series would be anything else must be living under a rock for the last few decades at least, because this is pretty much the blueprint in the modern era, especially when it comes to remakes and reboots. So number one, creative person makes something. So in this case, either Tolkien or maybe George Lucas. Number two, it gets popular. Number three, SJW sees successful thing. Number four, infiltrate successful thing and alienate existing fans who made it popular. Number five, they create something absolutely terrible. And last but not least, number six, repeat for the next IP. Let's just call it what it is. Amazon's Lord of the Rings show will be the biggest disaster of all time, and I can't wait. It just might be the straw that eventually breaks the camel's back in terms of woke. But it's also important to mention that they spent $500 million on the first season alone. I know what that means. You know what that means. We are looking at $1 billion L, boys. And that's really the only constellation, is that projects like this cost a whole lot of money. So unless they get a large return on their investment, they'll get absolutely hammered as a consequence. You can't possibly have lukewarm revenue returns on projects like this. Oh, and you're adding some woke narrative on top of that? Yeah, you're getting exactly what you deserve. These morons need to invade successful and established franchises because they have no originality or creativity of their own, so they have to pull this garbage. Look, if you are going to do this, you could have made the main character Galadriel. They could have made it about the path to the success of the Blue Wizards in turning the majority of the humans in the South away from joining Sauron in the War of the Ring. And if you wanted to add people of color, that's a great reason to. Heck, you could have done all of that and it would have still fit nicely into canon. And more importantly, without the need to destroy anything in the process. And speaking of destroying canon and desecrating Tolkien's legacy, that brings us to the second part of the video. An actor who's part of this diabolical cancerous show said that there was no strong female presence in Peter Jackson's trilogy. And that now, finally, we can have strong female characters in Lord of the Rings. Wow. Bravo! You just exposed yourself as a complete, utter novice. So are they just gonna pretend that Éowyn didn't exist? They are just gonna pretend that she didn't utter one of the most badass lines in the trilogy. Éowyn is a noble woman in Rohan. She fearlessly joined her father's army in secret, fighting savagely in one of the largest battles in Lord of the Rings history, and then killing the Witch King himself, who is like primeval number 2. But yeah, there's totally no strong female characters in Lord of the Rings. How dense can you be? And Éowyn is just one. You also have Arwen, who used her magic to ward off all of the Nazgul. And literally everyone forgets Galadriel and how she was one of the strongest characters in the entire movie series. By the actual book lore, Galadriel wasn't just a strong woman, she was one of the strongest beings in Middle-earth barring Sauron. Lord of the Rings literally has one of the most iconic and famous strong woman moments in the history of fiction. Strong woman in the modern fiction can pretty much all trace roots back to the women from the trilogy. So the people who say Lord of the Rings lacks diversity have neither read the books or watched the movies. And even if they've only watched the movie or read the book, they are still fully unable to understand what they just read or watched. Like I said, they are really as dumb as a rock. We now live in an age where news of a new work in a beloved series means sadness and disappointment. Now I think we all understand why Tolkien thought that the old days were the better days. When I need a dose of Lord of the Rings, I either reread the books or plan a weekend of the extended editions. Easy. There's no need to expose yourself to the modern garbage. The world is changing. I can feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. I can smell it in the air. Much that was once is now lost. What we used to love is killed and turned into wokeness. I'm hoping none live to remember it. And on that bombshell, that's a perfect way to end it. Mannix out.